Joining me now for his analysis, the Australian's political editor, Dennis Shanahan in Canberra. Dennis, tables are turned. It used to be that climate change was a weakness, certainly under Malcolm Turnbull, that Labor went after the government. But the PM's, he's opening up a real vein there with the opposition leader.
He certainly is. There is a great irony here that it is Labor facing a problem on climate change policy going into the next election, that Labor can't satisfy its various appendages left and right as to what should be a pragmatic climate change policy. We know that the climate change policy going into the last election, the inability and the refusal to cost Labor a huge amount of support. It was crucial in Labor's loss. What we've seen since then is Anthony Albanese saying, well, we'll make up a decision later. They've dropped in the national platform any targets at all. The general emphasis is going to be on zero emissions by 2050. But in the meantime, the right of the Labor Party wants to be able to say, why can't we just adopt the same targets, those Paris targets that the government has, say, yeah, well, it's all too close, we'll do that, and then when we get elected, we'll look at something beyond. Instead, there is still a fight. There is still a fight from the left of the Labor Party wanting to put in more ambitious targets. So Anthony Albanese's caught in the middle, and for once, it's the Labor Party where climate change is a negative.
Queenslanders head to the polls on Saturday. The campaign's in its final stretch. Let's have a listen.
It's up to the people of this state to decide, will they stick with me and our strong health response and our clear path for economic recovery, or will they risk all of that with Deb Frecklington and the LNP?
In 2016, Dennis, a last-minute move by the Labor government to introduce compulsory preferential voting meant they thought an easy way to cash in on a growing Greens vote, but it looks like it might backfire at this election because there's a shrinking One Nation vote in some regional areas that could come in behind the LNP. I'm interested in your view on that, but also whether you think that the One Nation polling we're seeing, you know, a depressed regional vote, is actually accurate.
Yeah, well, look, once again, polling is difficult to read, particularly when you have a wide range of polling over a large area and relatively small samples. And you have, as we're seeing in the United States, the claim that you have the Trump-shy voters, people who don't want to admit that they're supporting Donald Trump. This has always been the case in Australia, that there have been people who have been reluctant to even tell pollers that they support One Nation. There has been a history of One Nation being undercalled in pre-poll polling and then getting a bigger result. Now, this could happen in Queensland, and the introduction of the preferential voting could then play against the Labor Party by giving preferences from One Nation to LNP in some very tight seats. But on the other side of the spectrum, it also looks, and I suspect that Anastasia Palaszczuk's behaviour in the last few days and today's poll in the Australian suggests they are very worried, not that they'll lose the election, but they could end up as a minority government. Because what could happen, that preference strategy could now ensure that the Liberal Party, which has demonstrated in Queensland it's prepared to put the Greens ahead of Labor, means that in tight seats, the Liberal Nationals would be preferred to see a Green victory. And that could be the case. The Jackie Trad seat in South Brisbane, in the metropolitan city. This could affect several seats within Brisbane and then several seats outside Brisbane in far north Queensland, where Qatar and One Nation, while they're still only small, are going to have a lot of influence on preferences. I think just reading the itinerary of the Queensland Premier, she is worried, she is facing a minority government. That also, there's the euthanasia question. Took her support for the euthanasia took her colleagues by surprise. I'm told that it's got a lot to do with appealing to potential Green voters and to some independents who have actually pushed for euthanasia. So we're seeing her taking some unexplained risks, spending some inexplicable time in areas where she can't win seats, and that all suggests to me, whether it's the result or not, she fears she is facing minority government.
And you are spot on to be looking where leaders move in the last few days of a campaign. I always find it very telling. What seats of their own are they worried about? Where are they backtracking across? And what's opening up as new potential wins? Just quickly, I mean, if there wasn't a better statistic than this to tell you how tough it is for Victoria and how much the rest of the country is bailing them out, $200 million every day in economic support and $75 million of that going into Victoria. In terms of the overall $200 billion the Commonwealth spent on Victoria, let me correct that, $200 billion of the Commonwealth, $75 billion of that looks like it's payments for Victoria. That's pretty tough.
Yes, well, Josh Frydenberg today in Parliament made it clear that there are job losses in Victoria, almost 2,000 a day. The opening can't come too early. Look, I think that there have been terrible problems in Victoria on the health side, and I think the contact and tracing has been a problem from the beginning. Bits of paper and pencils. It's appalling compared to the other states, and that meant Daniel Andrews had to keep everything locked down because he can't handle it outside lockdown. We'll see how it goes, but the economic cost from Victoria has been huge, and the rest of Australia will have to carry that for years to come.
Absolutely will. They'll be picking up the tab. Dennis Shanahan, thank you for your analysis.
Thank you.